Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the podcast. My name is Jeremy, and this is Divergence Media. So, tonight, as I put in the announcements earlier, I swear what we're going to cover tonight, I would swear that we were going to be stepping into the Twilight Zone if it was not for the fact that these very words that we're going to be going over tonight were from one of the best friends of Winston Churchill himself. So I know you and I probably, if you're listening to our show, most of us, we really enjoy kind of our dystopian foretelling, if you will, or sort of the prophecies that different authors and different people have put forward over the years. And what gives them credibility, for me anyways, is I look at one of two things. One, I look at how much has this person already gotten right? Because my goodness, if they've already gotten this much right, what else have they gotten right? And what haven't we seen yet, right? So I like to kind of reference what people have said in the past to what's happening now and what may be coming in the future, just to entertain my brain and send me down some research. On the other hand of things, when we have somebody that is really plugged in at the top, they are plugged in and are in with the elite, when they say things, then I really get interested because I wonder, how did they come to these conclusions? What information was surrounding them that led them to the conclusions that they have? And that is what we are going over tonight. However, Cliff is actually going to be running this show tonight. He has done the research. He knows what's going on here, and he's going to be taking us down quite the rabbit hole tonight. So, Mr. Cliff, how are you, sir?
Not too bad. How are you going yourself?
I'm good, man. We've been, just busy with the family today, running around and just getting things together today. It's Saturday for me, so it's no work and just having some good family time.
Yep. Yeah, same here. Yep, going into spring here now, so it's starting to look good. Cleaning
That's
up,
good.
doing the spring cleaning, etc. Yeah. Yeah. So what we're talking about tonight is based on a video that I posted on my channel.
Mm-hmm.
That was a made up, similar as my other Alan Watt talks on my channel, where it's an old talk, which is back in 2007, and a lot of Alan Watt's talks are, if people get into his work, they need to go back as far back as they can find his work. And there is a site out there that goes back to, I think, even 2004, with a lot of recorded shows he did with a radio show.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, in about 2006, he started doing these blurbs that were quite foundational as well, and they're quite well recorded. So he goes into a lot of foundational stuff, like especially the main three, religion, government or politics, and money.
Mm-hmm.
So those things go together in the big system, what we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So it's recommended people go back and look at that, because if you do, you'll get a shortcut to a bigger picture, and it won't take long to get up to speed. So you know what's going on. You're not really fishing around and being misled so much of things that just don't have any foundation to them. And by knowing this, the other thing is, by knowing these things, the bigger picture, it does in fact put your mind at rest. Even though it's like, oh my God, this thing is immense. It still puts you at rest, because now you see the world a lot clearer. You can start to get a good feel for what to do properly. If you can see, the more you see the world in its truth, the more you can make better choices in life.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I think even Jordan Maxwell said that the decisions you make in life are only as good as the information that you have.
I guess that's kind of a two-sided coin too, isn't it, Bill? Because once you start coming to some of these realizations that we come to, as King Solomon said in Ecclesiastes in the Bible, and you guys know I'm not religious, but however, nevertheless, he was a very wise person. You could even just read his work as good philosophy. He said that he who increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. And I feel like that's somewhat true when you come to a lot of these realizations of how the world works. But then once you can sort of settle those realizations and, like you said, come to just a better understanding of how the world works, you can rest a little easier, because not everything isn't a mystery anymore. You can really understand how these gears and mechanisms work.
Yeah, exactly. So I suppose we'll start with, the introduction basically to the lead up to the book that was discussed in this talk,
Hmm.
was basically about utopianism, utopia,
Yeah.
which is what governments have always been about. Is and utopia, of course, would fit into civilization in general. So no country is exempt from utopianism.
Yeah.
And utopianism has these three parts: religion, money, and politics or government. So, yeah, so he goes into Francis Bacon, who, of course, is, a servant to the Queen. Lawyers, they're always lawyers. That's one thing you notice with just about anyone, especially even today, in an influential position, especially to do with voice. You know, radio show hosts, TV show hosts, news hosts, even some actors. They have a background in law,
Hmm.
whatever that is. So they're top, a lot of them, and of course, the higher up they go in magicianship, the more they're into this thing called law. They have, if you look at all their degrees, etc., and what they have. I mean, even just looking, I'll bring Francis Bacon up. Um,
That is
he's
fascinating.
he's PC, Privy Council of England, and QC, Queen's Council. Now we're getting into the law thing.
Hmm.
Uh, right, and same with More, Thomas More, which is the other mention in this talk. Uh, we'll put the talk in the description maybe as well, so people can just
Yeah.
access it straight on the channel.
Yeah, absolutely. I would recommend, and this is the kind of talk when you're listening to Alan Watt, he is not the entertainer where you can simply sit down and be entertained. He is the kind of person you want to sit down, grab a pen and notepad, and be in a position to where you can really focus on what he's saying because he doesn't waste words. Words are not wasted with Alan Watt, and every sentence that comes out of his mouth has some purpose and some meaning. So when you sit down, be ready to take notes because he's going to send you down rabbit holes. He like Cliff here, he wants you to think a bit. He's not going to give it all to you. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and I mean, the other thing is that to be efficient with the words and the time, to be constructive with our time, it's best that we give a cursory uh, introduction to um, people and topics, an introductory, and some of them obviously people haven't heard of, and then they go down and research it for themselves.
Hmm.
That's typically what happens. So again, yeah, Thomas More was into law, of course, as well. They're all into religion, so the more you start looking at these people and that you obviously see they're all in bed with the church and religion, so all the courts all around the world are obviously heavily linked to religion, which is interesting in itself.
Hmm.
I refer to the public as the church. The
Sure.
whole public system is really just the church.
The people.
Um, yep, and which I should mention that, and Jordan went over this years ago. The word church goes back to older words. The next transformation down through time is kirk in Scottish, right? So church used to be called kirk in Scotland. That was what you'd call church. And then further back into Roman times is circe, and that's where we also associate the word circus. It's a bread and circuses.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you go further back into Greece, and we get into Circe or Mother Circe, Mother Church, Mother Circe. And if people just go and look that up, you'll find a very interesting little caption on what the system is. So really, the whole thing is a church. The banks, the church, the militaries, even the church, all militaries. And this is why it links into a thing called Freemasonry. All churches are really Freemasonry. So that's the hurdle people need to get over to get into the occult of the system.
Just looking at Thomas More here too, what I find kind of fascinating about him is, of course, if we've studied history, or for example, if we look at something like the Bloody Mary situation with the fight against the Protestants that we've seen with the Catholic Church over the years. If you've ever studied any of that kind of history, we know sort of the character of the people that were fighting the Reformation, of from the Catholic Church to the Martin Luther doctrine, and it's just fascinating to see sort of the nature, and how that nature and the state can coincide.
Yep.
Of course, I guess that is, if you've studied that, that's a whole other rabbit hole. I don't want to go into too much detail there. Just an observation, I guess I can make. But go
Sure.
ahead.
And yeah, and keep in mind, I mean, just another little link for people if they haven't looked, look up Bill Cooper, British Israelism, or British Israel, and Bill Cooper, and he
Mm-hmm.
does a breakdown of the British Israel connection, and he does go into, as a big factor of this British Israelism thing, you'll see that a big part of it was connected to Thomas More, where you see he got executed as a martyr, so he's a martyr now, even
Mm-hmm.
right up to today. They're saying, right,
Yep.
and so he was refused to acknowledge the supreme head of the Church of England,
Mm-hmm.
right, which was uh, uh, Henry VIII.
Yep.
Right, he refused to acknowledge that he no longer wanted to be associated with his wife. He wanted to divorce his wife, and so the whole thing had to come about. They had to make a story to become Protestant because they were trying to separate through illegalities of his wife, of his marriage. So the whole thing uh, was to separate from the church, but it's not really. It's just it's a thing for the king to legally disassociate from his wife. And even that could be a con. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not really good enough grounds to say that they're separate, that they're actually
Sure.
that Protestant and the Pope, etc. So yeah, so there's a whole lot in that, and that's the other thing with this. When you study big time people like Francis Bacon and Thomas More, and even Lord Birkenhead, check out his father, because we're talking about the guy who wrote this book is Lord Birkenhead,
Mm-hmm.
and his father was embroiled in controversy as well. So yeah, so a lot of interesting stuff to read about these people because they are eugenicists. They are into eugenics, which is um, breeding basically. It's
Sure.
it's class systems and breeding. That's why we have class systems. Um,
And that's, you can actually get into the psychology of that as well. And while many of you may not like the guy, but and understandably so, Jordan Peterson actually even talks about that a little bit in his book, The 12 Steps to Life. And he kind of talks of, that's sort of an inherent thing that humans actually have, is to, even if it's at a minimal level, it's sort of your acknowledgement of, just sort of eugenics, if you will, right? A lot of things that men do, we think we do for certain reasons, but it's actually to attract a higher quality mate, if you will. There is a certain sense of just, primitive actions there to go in. However, when we look up here at the elite, it's not necessarily unintentional. It's very intentional that they continue a bloodline, and for whatever reasons they may be, it's just fascinating to see that exists. Across all religions, just at the top, we see that quite often.
sure. And the whole thing of eugenics, I've said this before, and people will start to see it the more they look at it. The whole eugenic system is based on money. Money. If we didn't have a monetary system, because there could be millions of systems they're not telling us about, but they just decided to give us a commerce money system.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that's the only way to go. But the money system is naturally eugenic because it's property based, control based, and all that stuff of masses of people and families. Typically, in most countries, you'll see that like a rich girl who's from a rich family, she's really not going to marry uh, a a lesser class, basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it does happen, but if it did happen, as you know, the families frown on it. Oh, we don't think you should marry him, and that. So it's common. It doesn't. You don't need to be royalty to interbreed. It's
Right.
just a common thing based on the monetary class system. Yeah. So I mean, nobody's talked about this. The news won't tell us this. We have to figure it all out. So yeah, so back to this Thomas More. So Thomas More, I mean, a lot of people know more about Francis Bacon. So we talk about the New Atlantis. That's in this talk, the New Atlantis, which is the New World, and the New World Order. And what is the New World? America. It was called the New World. The New Egypt, it's been called as well. The New Egypt. So when we look at the in that talk I posted, you'll see I put up a few pictures of Bacon's Utopia, or his New Atlantis. New Atlantis. See, it kind of echoes that they know about Atlantis. They know about the high technologies of so-called Atlantis. These guys all know that stuff. They know the facts. We don't.
Mm-hmm.
So, why did he call it the New Atlantis? So, in that picture, in one of the pictures I posted in that video, you'll see a 5-pointed star, but it's more sticks. There are 5 sticks coming out of a center. You'll see it's a center, like a round circle with these 5 points. And he's drawing pictures of the New Atlantis. Now, what is the 5-pointed star? The Pentagon. And so he's drawing the Pentagon way back, hundreds of years ago. He's drawing the Pentagon.
Wow.
And I mean, a lot of people won't notice that, but that's
Sure.
what the Pentagon is. And then, of course, the walls, etc., and that's just security, representative security and stuff. So,
and for everyone listening too, Cliff, real quick, this talk that we're going over is on Cliff's channel, which the link to that is in the description of this video that you're watching on YouTube. So just go down there, click on Cliff's channel, and then you can go find this. So a lot of this is notes on that talk. So if you're at this point, if you guys are watching live, just continue to watch live. Don't leave and go watch the video, but definitely go watch this video. But you can find it in the description.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my videos, I like to put in a lot of symbolism and that to make you think, and I love to put and show people, because I see it. I just see it as I look through the net, and I come across pictures years ago that I might have grown up with that I didn't know what they were, and they come out again, and I say, hang on, this is what they're showing us again. Like a classic one I like is, like, you remember there was a cartoon, we had it growing up, called Judge Dredd, and it was called 2000 AD. Judge Dredd, right?
I never saw that.
Wow, check it out. It was a cartoon we grew up with. There was even a movie with Sylvester Stallone called Judge Dredd, based on the comic.
Oh,
right?
wow. Okay.
So it was DC Comics, DC, District of Columbia, Washington, DC Comics. And what did they give you? They gave you a RoboCop type guy who was called Judge Dredd. His colors were blue and red and gold, or white, same thing. And he was the law. I am the law. 2000 AD, right? 2001, Twin Towers. What's the new Patriot Act here? The Patriot Act coming after 2001. Now the cops, I am the law. So that's how they do it. Predictive programming.
Yep.
So there's a lot of stuff like that. A lot of symbolism everywhere, for people to see. So anyway, back to the talk. So I'm just going through it in my head, what I remember, of what I've made. So then we noticed that, so Alan, what's going on about, like he's told you about Bacon, he's told you about More, he's told you about that they're talking about the very thing you're living in hundreds of years ago. Right. Then he brings you into a little bit higher, just after the Industrial Revolution, with this guy, Earl of Birkenhead, Lord Birkenhead. We've actually got a small township in Auckland, that's North Auckland, called Birkenhead too, and that will be named after him. I guarantee it. They always do this.
So now I've got this pulled up on YouTube here. This is the author of this book that we're going to be getting into here. It's called The World in 2030. So as we go down this hole here, this is the author of this book here, F.E. Smith, first Earl of Birkenhead. Very fascinating guy here. But continue on there, Cliff. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, Frederick Edwin Smith, that's his name. And
Okay.
like I said, check out his father, his father's. And a fun thing to do, if you want to know about bloodlines and all that stuff, you look at in Wikipedia, keep clicking on their dad or their mum
Mm-hmm.
and look at who they're linking to. Look at their fathers, and you find they go back to kings and royalty and, high up bankers and scientists and all that, you know. So these guys, and by the way, of course, banking, of course, goes into law. That's why they're all lawyers, and the lawyers fit in with the bankers and the judges and all that. So they're all linked. Law and money is very closely linked. So lots to read there if you just even look them up. These people are, if you don't believe what the talking about, just look it up. So he's going on about, yeah. So I'll bring it up the picture. Hang on. I've got so many blooming pictures here that I've prepared. I'm just trying to go over the main tenets. Hang on a sec. Here it is. Right. Yeah, so starting the article, he shows a picture of this guy that's in the Cosmopolitan magazine back in 1929, which is, obviously before World War II, after World War One. You're in the middle of these two great wars, which bring massive change and that bring technology massively forward. You've got a lull between these great wars at a peak of industrial revolution, really, in Europe. It's peaking out big time. So in the start of the article, the main points we could talk about, because these are the main points he makes. So he's saying babies will be produced. This is his prediction to 2029, so 100 years in the future. Isn't that interesting? Again, Agenda 21,
Mm-hmm.
100-year plan. See, so they do.
Yep.
So this is why we know, we don't guess, we know they have 100-year plans at least because they write about it. And this is an example. 100-year plans. Now, how many people know that? So babies will be produced by chemists in laboratories.
Yeah.
And we're already seeing that. There's it's called ectogenesis, or genesis. And
Yeah. I've got an article pulled up here actually talking about that for you guys too, because we here this right here is an article from The Conversation, from frozen ovaries to lab grown babies, the future of childbirth. And this author here is talking about that. He says it is almost 40 years since the first IVF baby, Louise Brown, was born. While this amazing breakthrough was highly controversial at the time, IVF is today commonplace. So how is conception and childbirth likely to change over the next 40 years and beyond? The rapid pace of research in the areas of fertility and reproduction raises some mind-boggling questions about the future. Will we conceive and grow babies entirely in laboratories, making sex and pregnancy a thing of the past? And will all future babies be genetically designed? So, I mean, we can go down this article if you wanted to, but, you get the idea of where, this was of 2016. So this was even 3 years ago. I mean, this is already, like you said, this is being brought to the table of conversation now.
sure. And there already a lot of articles this year alone have been, since the start of the year, have been boasting about China. It's nothing to do with just China.
Mm-hmm.
The whole world will be doing it, but typically our media will point to China because that's what our media will do. China's media will point to us. That's
Right.
conflict
Mm-hmm.
while doing trade, of course. But yeah, so with China, apparently China is actually doing it, which of course they're doing it. They've probably already done it. They've probably already done all this. It's just that they need to wait for the right time or the right crisis because if they have to, they'll use necessity again to bring this in. Of custom designer babies, which again, class comes into it. The people will be able to not just pay for a scientist to make a perfect baby between the wife and the husband.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in other words, they could engineer the wife and husband's baby to be devoid of contamination, or devoid of certain tendencies of the genes, any illnesses, or you know anything that could be rejected. So that's one way they'll go with it.
Well,
And
that
then
was I said
yeah,
that was actually China's. That was the controversy actually over the China thing you were talking about. Is that it was a genetic alteration to the baby that made it immune to the HIV virus. So the father had the HIV virus, and they were able to genetically alter this baby's DNA so that it was, not it would not be affected by the HIV virus. Now, that on the surface, of course, that sounds really great, but of course, you also have a huge amount of people that are saying, "Yo, we should not be messing with the DNA of humans," and that's where the kind of the pushback comes in. And that's another debate we don't need to get into, but that's what the whole China thing was about. At least one case.
yep. Well, there you go, exactly. Because they've got to justify it, otherwise nobody's going to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
if it looks too dangerous, if it looks too dangerous, the people will want the government to shut it down. So they have to get these strange things to come to be is usually crisis, of course, or you know, couch it with neuro-linguistic programming, dolly it up and pitch it to the public and sell it to the public,
Mm-hmm.
which is, well, I think that'll be how they do it. Um, but even like this, they could justify through consent again of the people. They could justify growing limbs for you or growing organs for you, so you no longer need to harvest people, which China's doing already.
Right.
A lot of countries are probably doing that, but like they'll justify that again, crisis and solution. Oh my God, we got to stop these people trafficking for organs. Oh well, we're going to create them in the lab.
Sure.
Mm,
Sure, but even they would even serve a purpose. However, if you just consider soldiers, right? I mean, you could look at it that side. They're just going to, manufacture soldiers to fight their wars. Or one of the main arguments behind a monarchy is that you have someone raised from a child that is raised to, always have the ideas of the people in mind. So now you can have a child that is not loyal to any particular mother or father. They have no emotional connection to anything but maybe a test tube. Whatever is in their laboratory. They have no love or compassion in them towards an individual person. They can be brought up to think whatever it is that their creators want them to think, without any, I don't know. I mean, do they? What's the definition of a human? Right? Does this fall outside of a human? And so, are there human rights implications
mm,
here? I mean, there's so many questions to be asked.
exactly. And because we're already being engineered on a subtle level with propaganda, food, and vaccines and all the rest of it, because we're already being engineered, it'll become a new normal. All they're going to do is increase the frequencies of this or that, and people start to adapt to it. I mean, already, like I said, Google says we're not even to do with nature now.
Right.
Darwin's gone out the window. I mean, what? Yet they'll still
Mm-hmm.
preach Darwinism. So yeah, so this is what I'm trying to get to is, or what I've found is that the future that we will see is going to be so bizarre, and this is why it has to get bizarre. We're going through a transition of the whole freaking world on a massive scale because all of these sciences and technologies are merging. So it's going to create a very, very interesting thing. I mean, you mentioned how technique is getting into the law. The technological uh, 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 technologies are working with law as well to create new types of jurisdiction, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so much to it. So, this is what I mean. We've got to stick on the main points because things will change very fast. We're
Yeah.
talking, he's talking an estimation of 2029. So it'd say another 10 years, a lot of these things are going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And we know,
So,
like you mentioned, Agenda 21, we have an Agenda 2030 as well, which brings
There
us
you
to
go.
2030. And so the deadline for a lot of those things is by 2030. And maybe some of that ties into this. Keep in
Abs-
mind,
ab-
remember this guy was he was pretty much best friends with Winston Churchill. So a lot of this may be a much larger plan that we're seeing into here. This is not just some random dude foretelling what he thinks might happen.
sure. Because this guy is high up there, he's in the inbred families. He's got his pedigree. Uh, so he's right up there. He will be access to the archives. He has access to the archives that can show him these plans. That's why they have archives. We have libraries. The
Mm-hmm.
libraries is pretty much just propaganda now. And then,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the books of old, as you know, the books of old are highly technical, way more technical than probably they're giving most people today.
Sure.
And all those books are gone or going. The machine, in other words, the machine is doing the work. You don't need to think. You don't need the latest books on all this metaphysical stuff. You don't need it because the machine will do it for you. That's why we're dumbed down
Sure.
with
It's a form of
simplicity.
newspeak, and just it's a burning of books, of course, but just in erasing and rewriting history. Uh, and in fact, I dropped an article today to show where there are some people in Israel that are reevaluating the idea that Jews were not responsible for the murder of Jesus. Now, whether that's true or not is a different conversation, but they are calling for a rewriting of history. If you think about all the implications and sort of the way history has been written since then with the Crusades and everything else, there's a major push here to rewrite all of the history that stemmed from that. And
Yep.
I'm sure there'll be some pushback from that. But the question is really, when we, even the history that we look at now, how do we know really what changes have been made already? I mean, there's no way we
Mm.
can look back and know. That's why we have, like you said, libraries, the information they want us to have, while
Yep.
they have archives, the real facts.
Yep. And just with that religion thing, this is why Lenin and Stalin and Mao and others, Darwin and there's so many of them. Um, they say that atheism is an absolute staple of our communist globalist plan, of our globalist communist propaganda. Atheism is a must, right? I've posted many quotes on that. So that is to get into the intergenerational families, the changes, like we'll dilute the religion, we'll corrupt the religion, we'll get priestly pedophiles everywhere, be it true or not, right? Maybe they've been corrupted. This is how good they are. They'll corrupt the priests, then the people no longer have that religion. Not that that religion was freeing you anyway, but they just need to bring that down though. So we'll call all the priests pedophiles. We'll laugh at them when they run for office, which they're already doing. All of this is to kill the old religion. What's called the God religion, basically. That's
Right.
what they're. Yeah. They want science to rule. This is going to be the world. This age of Aquarius is the world of science. Complete. And look at what science is. I mean, the Soviet Union was run on science. It was atheistic and it was run on science, which is just another religion, right? They were
Mm-hmm.
growing fucking bean patties in the snow, saying, "Oh, they'll grow extra strong," and it didn't work. So this is a sort of thing, and it's going back to that talk with R.D. Laing. He said they're squeezing nature for it to scream to give us the truth. This is the globalists, what they're doing. Like Birkenhead,
Yeah.
like Lord Birkenhead.
I think what they've came to a realization, and many of us, for those of us that really research these things and go into detail, try to find truth for ourselves. Sometimes I think it can be difficult to figure out why a population of people absolutely must have a religion or something to fall onto, right? So I'm not religious, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I don't see a need for it, because as it is, the masses as a whole always need something to put their faith into, and they need some sort of central system of ethics in order for them to follow, where everyone just kind of loses their way. Because generally speaking, the masses as a whole, on average, they won't necessarily think for themselves. So
Sure.
they realize that if they can destroy all the old religions, like you say, and then replace it with their own religion, there's a huge opportunity for control here.
Yeah.
Uh, because if they get rid of the old religions, they're not going to replace it with facts and logic. They're going to look for something else to put their faith into.
Yeah, and of course the other obvious point in this clearly is that the people of old, going back to the church when the Pope and all that, it was very religious. Had very the churches were such a big part, and the Bibles were part, and the Quran, etc. All of that was basing it on not necessarily kissing the Pope's robe, which is really just the state coming in with its science, right? But
Mm-hmm.
if we look at the religious concept of truly religious families that went to church, they prayed to God, all that stuff, that was to that was for their individual families and selves, small groups and small tribes, to have something to hold on to in hard times. So this
Mm-hmm.
is why it was so important, because we all fall on hard times, and if you don't have something to have faith in, you can lose all faith, and that's not good.
Yeah.
So we can see that by them abolishing that idea of small tribes and increasing collectivism, big mass man, etc., through the Industrial Revolution, we start to see that now they're coupling it with just now science as a new religion, and who's running science? The state.
Mm-hmm.
The state. So when people fall on hard times, do they go and pray to God? No, they go to the state. That's what they want.
And I have some evidence for this actually. If you guys spend any time in the political debate arena, you'll know that there's sort of this postmodernist movement that's going around that's typically attached to a very Marxist ideology, but is also a denial of all ethics, to say that all ethical systems are ambiguous, that it's completely opinionative to whatever your culture is. So there is no appropriate system of ethics, and it is just whatever you choose. I think it actually also ties into sort of I've mentioned it a few times with linguistics, but it's also it goes a little further than just linguistics. Is with Jacques Derrida's philosophy of deconstructionism, this new philosophy that is being pushed by by academics and quote unquote scholars and intellectuals, is going to leave the population in just a pile of nothing. And if you've studied history and philosophy at all, you've seen the impact that at the academic level, philosophy plays out into politics and public discourse. You may not realize that because you don't see how that transition happens, but it does. And what we're seeing now is just a new philosophy that leaves everybody with no faith in anything, with really no system of ethics to follow, really nothing at all. It's just a rejection of all thought and complete faith and trust in the government, that you trust them to do the thinking for you because that's what's best for the collective, that you as an individual are worthless. It is the collective that matters, and you don't need to think as an individual because it's only the collective that matters. So I know it's somewhat of a different rabbit hole there, but it ties in here with what you're talking about.
Sure, and then for newcomers, don't forget that really it isn't the government telling you what to think; it's the system telling you what to think, because
Mm-hmm.
the government is backed up by the big corporations, of course, and they've got the most advertising, and
Yep.
so the government works with the corporations to sell you the shit, and that's how they're doing the climate change thing right now. Their typical thing. And of course the latest thing now, because people obviously are too dumbed down, like why aren't the parents stopping them? Is they're getting the children to rise up like Mao Zedong's little red book. Look at the communist revolution in China, and you will see the same technique.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly the same thing. Go for the children. So what they did in China is they turned the children against the elderly. Now they could easily do that here under climate change because save the planet, more compost, right?
Uh,
Uh, etc. etc. Euthanasia bills. See, withdrawal of drugs. Oh, there's too many people. We can't. Oh, we're out of drugs. Sorry. So that's all works together. And I mean, if people see it for how horrendous it is, maybe they'll do something about it. That's all I can see to do is just at least get it out there to know that there's so many things wrong now that are not really wrong. They're fixed, but there's so many
Yep.
things wrong. You've got to stop participating in this. You've got to stop. You've got to stop working for these people. You know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the first step for us is to individually work on making ourselves less dependent on this very system that we want to rebel against. Right. That means working with our communities, our individual communities, getting to actually know our neighbors, right? Not just stay on our staring at our screens constantly.
Sure.
We need to be communicating with our neighbors, figuring out their strengths and weaknesses, figure out what do your neighbors know how to do. I live in a very particular situation. I live out in the country where every Joe Schmo knows how to hunt and plant. Their family's been farming for generations, and so I'm good. I've got running water in the yard. Hey, I'm going to be just fine, right?
Oh,
But
yeah.
not everybody is that way. If you live in the city, you need to find ways to make yourself less dependent on this system, because if your very existence and survival is reliant on this system existing, you're not really in a good position to fight back against it. They have you enslaved. You are their slave. There's nothing you can do about it. You've got to first remove those chains before you can actually do anything about it.
Mhm. It's incredibly amazing how detailed their plan is. Like when you
Hmm.
see it, when you see the effects of what's happened, and you think, did this happen by chance? How could it all have happened by chance? Like
No.
here's this guy talking about 100 years ago. How could it have happened by chance? Like we'll continue with Birkenhead. So, for instance, the entire institution of marriage will be changed. Well, it already practically has. 10 more years, they'll say, why not? We've got the transgender, we've got bloody MGTOW going down, we got, marriage is gone anyway. So we're going to bring in a new idea of marriage, and that will constitute incorporation of these new ectoplasmic beings. Knew this, knew that. Like I said, the whole thing's going to change. Destroy the old to bring in the new. That's another slogan I think the Freemasons talk about. Albert Pike, I think, said that. Yeah.
Yep. So
So yeah,
what's some of the projections that this guy had? There's some quotes that I pulled out. He had some really interesting projections. Now granted, I will say that one of them was he said that we would be on a 48-hour day because we were going to be able to slow the rotation of the earth. And in my research of that, just to lighten the mood here for a minute, I did see that the Soviet Union at one point in time tried to it was called Operation Retro, and it was their idea that if there was a nuclear attack on Russia, that they could potentially slow the rotation of the Earth with rockets enough to make it temporarily, literally stop, and then start going again, so that they could throw off the projection of the or the trajectory of the of the rockets. This is comical as shit to think that this was actually something that they seriously considered. Nevertheless, so there's that. But at the same side of things, this was written what in 1929. Cliff, wasn't this 1929?
yeah, 1929.
Sure.
Uh, when was it? June or July or something? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I've tried to put the page in so you can put it up online, and it won't come through. So that's weird. I've
What's
got
the
a
for the book itself?
yeah. There's a picture that I've got that you can read quite clearly of his statements on the main points that we're talking about. So
Oh,
I've
no
tried to
worries.
put it in. Yeah, I've tried to put
I'll
it in
pull
there.
it
It
up.
won't go in. So
I'll pull it up. Is it?
um,
I've got some stuff here. I can pull it up.
yep.
Let's
So
see.
so he continues because all the points are here. So he continues. We will all live to be 150.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We will all. Who's we and who's all? Does that mean that the general peasants? I think generally not. I would assume not. But I mean, hey, there might be some that are rich enough to do that. Oh, surely they're going to have a monetary doorway to who can live to 150.
Sure.
That's an
Yeah.
assumption. I could be wrong. Because you think about this, if they made the population live to 150, right, they could then justify more sterilization, quid pro quo again. So people will go, yeah, I want to live to a narcissistic, right? I want to live to 150, but I
Speed.
won't have any kids. See, so they'll do that, and then maybe that's the thing where that people fall for these things. They do. They'll give with one hand, take with another. So
Well,
we could,
there's
yeah,
so we see right now what we have to recognize is that there's two types of society, right? We have a select group of people, a very small group of people that have recognized how different cultures operate, and so we either see the state controlling the people or the private sector controlling the people. So if you live anywhere in the West, what we're really going to see is a paywall by the private sector with this technology. If there's technology that can keep you around till you're 150 years old, or technology that can quote unquote perfect the human condition, such as transhumanism, some of the stuff that DARPA and Tesla is working on to literally connect your brain to the internet. The goal here is that this will only benefit the rich and the elite, and that is just part of capitalism. It will not be really anything that you and I will get to partake in, nor would I want to. However, for those that want to sell their soul to the devil, if you will, it's going to obviously work in their favor to just continuously push down the small man like you and me.
yep,
So, anyways, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I've got this page pulled up here, which is basically, Cliff. What this goes through is just basically goes through his talk in detail. It's actually a good link here. I'll drop this also in the live chat here in a little while. The live voice text, live
sure,
chat.
yep,
Yeah,
yep.
people enjoy.
And
Listening.
also, the book, if you the book is out there, obviously for free. The actual PDF of the book
Mm-hmm.
2030. Jeremy, you found it. So if you've got a link to that, put it in the
I sure will.
description.
Sure
Something
will.
like
I'll
that.
just actually drop the actual PDF right in the chat, so they can just download it right from the chat, or
Yep.
I can send the link to the description. Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we'll continue. So so that's a big open thing there. We'll live to 150. No one will need to work for more than 2 hours a day. I mean, wow, that's already here, isn't it? Everyone like losing their job or being, the technology taking over or whatever. Maybe,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can see it starting to happen. You
So
know,
from
the,
there, I would say in the U.S., Cliff, how I don't know what politics is like where you're at. Is the public, I'll say quote unquote political discourse, is a lot of it about we've got to find jobs? Is that their main push politically? Is we're going to create more jobs?
yeah, I mean, we get the same propaganda speak through the government as Ireland, England, Australia, Canada, etc. When it happens there, it happens here. It's crazy, but this is how their world agenda is working together now. It's so perfectly put together that if we have a housing crisis, everyone else has got a housing crisis now, or vice versa. So yeah, pretty much the same shit,
Yeah.
is being, that's what I mean. The whole thing is propaganda. The news is propaganda. There may not be a housing crisis specifically the way that you think. It might be the way that they think, and then they're just using it as an excuse to bring in what they're doing here. Typically, is they're bringing in Soviet style big building flats where you can fit in 1,000 people into this building, and they're all little rooms and that where they all live on top of each other, and so it's not that pretty, to be honest. Cramming
Yeah, but
people into cities.
yeah, but what better way to reduce our carbon footprint, man? We got to save the
Mm.
earth.
Sure. Well, it makes a better target. If you compress a whole lot of people into a tight space, they're easy to kill them then.
Yeah.
So
So
keep that
I
in mind.
think I think so. It's going to be a couple things. We're going to see a major push for new forms of energy. Uh, there's going to and we have seen some scientific breakthroughs lately on some new forms of energy, which is actually really good. However, that's going to be, of course, limited and probably very expensive. So. But yeah, I think with this whole new climate change agenda, that's exactly what's going to happen. We're going to get pushed into the cities and just kind of, crammed on top of each other. But that's just, I don't know. I guess that's a different topic. We don't want to get too
Yeah,
far
I
off on
mean,
that.
yeah. Well, I mean, the amazing thing is to me all of the points he's making, I hope you can see it. The picture I'm looking at is an old picture copied of the Cosmopolitan magazine, and it's got a picture of um, Lord Birkenhead with the lightning strikes behind his head and
Yep.
the Saturn, right? So I'm looking at that picture, and I can't post it down there, of course, but
I've got it pulled up right here.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So if you look down the bottom of that page, you'll see the points that I'm going over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So and then in red, outlined in a box, it says agriculture will be abolished. Agriculture will be abolished, except as a hobby,
Yep.
and all foodstuffs will be produced synthetically. Now, this is obviously happening. It's speeding up like we wouldn't believe.
Here you go.
One of
Check.
the
No,
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
mean,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
the policies in New Zealand and that are just starting to knock at your door in America is exactly what he's saying there. They want to. New Zealand was a breadbasket for the world with its everything. We could grow tons of beautiful meat, sheep, deer, beef. We had a lot of agriculture with corn and tomatoes and apples. Like we would export apples to Japan, and we'd get all the dregs here. We get these shitty little apples with little holes and wormholes, and then they sell it to us for
Yeah.
$5 a kilo. And in Japan, they get this apple in a box, in a cardboard box, and it's all prettied up. And you open up, it's this big bloody apple thing. Yeah, it was a New Zealand apple. So now they want to get rid of all that.
So
And
check
I'm not.
this out.
Yeah,
I know you have a major delay on YouTube. Uh, so I think part of this is, of course, we're going to see a push from the climate change agenda again, that we need to, get away from eating a steak a day because that, contributes to climate change, et cetera, et cetera. And PETA has an article here. It's called Animals Are Not Ours, right? Of course, that's part of it. But this is a guide to how to eat meat without actually eating meat. So here's all these vegan alternatives to meat that look just like meat, right? Cliff, last week or Wednesday, you made a statement. You said, well, all of our meat is going to grow. Well, it is. Here it is.
yeah,
And as you scroll through here, you're going to see that you've got hamburger meat, we've got meatballs and chicken nuggets and all this different stuff that they can. I mean, this looks convincing, right? If you're looking at these pictures, it's kind of like going to a fast food restaurant. The burger looks nice and juicy and delicious. Of course, when you get it, it's not at all. But a lot of this food is an alternative to meat. It's supposed to look just like meat, but it's not. It's not at all. It's not meat. It's disgusting. It's
exactly.
whatever they've grown on plants and put together to have you some sort of science lab hamburger. It's not real food at all. But this
Yeah,
is exactly what we're going to, is this kind of stuff here.
yep. And all of this will have a higher purpose. That's the thing. I mean, a lot of people know the climate change thing's a load of crap from what I've been seeing. A lot of different areas of classes I've seen on the net in my social groups realize it's a load of rubbish. They don't know what's going on, but they realize it's a load of rubbish.
Sure.
So there's a higher motive for all of this. I think there'd be a higher motive than what he's saying. Like he's telling you what they're planning, but he's not telling you why they're really doing it. There'll be something even bigger of why we're even here and why they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So we still don't know that. We're still looking. Uh, so here's another one. Man will be able to alter the geography of climate of the world.
Well, this is
And
a
they're
big
talking
one
about
here, isn't it?
climate change. Yeah, and this is again 1929, and they're talking about the climate. I mean, I posted a video. People go on YouTube and check it out. Lyndon Johnson, and type in Lyndon Johnson talks about control of the weather back in, I don't know, the
Yep.
50s, in black and white, and he's saying, "Who controls the weather? Controls the world." Like, and he's got a mortarboard
Mm-hmm.
on his head and everything. So I mean, this is how it is.
But
This is not
and
an old
we
thing.
know now. We know that they're altering the climate now. We know that they're
That's right.
using cloud seeding technology, and uh, there's some lasers that they shoot up there and stuff. I don't know. I'm not well rehearsed or studied into that topic, but I know enough to know that they've admitted to such of altering the climate. And we know that they've done tests and different things during Vietnam, right? All this, there's a lot of public records. that we'll probably go into. Cliff, you might be a little bit more rehearsed on that than I am. I don't know. I need to do my research on it, but I know that it exists.
Absolutely. I mean, that could be another topic down the line.
Hmm.
It is a big topic in itself, in it, to do it justice. But there's a lot of proof out there, a hell of a lot of proof that there is uh, uh, basically weather manipulation been going on for a long time. It was done globally in 1998. It started globally
Hmm.
as a geoengineering program, and now they're actually saying in the mainstream media they're doing it anyway. So it's all out there. It's happening. It's just that people don't want to believe it's happening. If we want, I can show you videos and photos I've collected myself.
What?
I've got a picture of a cloud, right, that all of a sudden starts getting these lines through it, like been gridded out. You imagine a cumulus
Yeah.
cloud that's nice and fluffy, and it's like someone's gotten a grill and gone flip along the cloud, and it's perfectly cut into small pieces. So what the hell is that? I mean,
Hmm.
this is part of the way they're doing it. Yeah,
And I this for whatever reason, this is just where my mind goes. We are going to see. I'm calling this in advance. Very soon from now, very shortly, we are going to start to see this as mainstream. Right? I think it's about that time. Typically, the
yes,
the linear scale of things is that we see conspiracy theorists say, quote unquote, conspiracy theorists say, "Hey, they're doing these things." Everyone says, "Oh no, you're a nut job. That's not true." And then a few years down the road, the mainstream media comes out and says, "Hey, we're doing these things for all these wonderful, great reasons." And everyone goes, "Oh, look how great this is. This is going to be fantastic." And then everyone that's been telling them for years that this was going to happen is like, "Hey, we've been telling you for years." The only difference is, though, is that the mainstream media and the powers that be are going to add a twist to it to where you are going to willingly accept it. You're going to be glad that it's come. Oh, this is going to be great. And you're going to completely miss the idea and the point that, wait, they've actually been doing this for years. They themselves have actually been altering the climate to create this entire climate change agenda. And that's what they've used to strip your actual rights away from you. And I'm not claiming
sure.
that as a fact. That's just what I think at this point. That's what I'm being led to believe at this point. Um, I don't know that for a fact that that's what's going on, but that is sure as shit what it looks like to me right now.
Sure. Yeah, they're totally amping it up. I mean, there's so many points we could talk about on the weather thing, as I said.
Hmm.
Even the news, the way it presents things, the way it presents the weather, the way the weather people around the world, I would assume, because ours is shot, but I imagine around the world it's the same. We go and look at the weather, and it's not even true. Like, you're looking at today's weather, and it isn't even true. They totally got that wrong, and
Yeah,
yet they're predicting 50 to 100 years in the future what the
sure.
weather's going to be like. So it's crazy stuff, and I think a lot of people are waking up to it, of course. But of course, they don't know what's going on. So this is why we're here. We're trying to link it together so people can get a big picture of what's going on and who's behind it too.
Yep.
So we'll continue. So here's another one that's obvious to people that are even slightly political, is he says coal mining will be an extinct industry. I mean, that's so the US. Oh, we're going to shut down the coal. In Australia, oh, we're green, and they're always the greeny lefts come in and say, oh, we're going to shut down the coal mines in Australia. It's not going to happen because the whole bloody country runs on it. So they're at a massive crisis point right now. They've got a highly Christian based guy in there at the moment, very conservative. He's meant to be like Trump. And so, what the media is doing now, because the media is definitely left biased, we can see that. I'm not saying the right is going to win or anything like that, but I'm just saying that right now the media is predominantly leftist in its nature. And its techniques. And so, what it does with leaders that are conservative is they just won't publish their stuff. They just
Sure.
won't publish it, and that's what's going on. Like, you go and type in Mr. Morrison. What's his name? Christopher Morrison or Timothy? I can't remember his first name, but his name's Morrison. And he basically, the media won't tell you what his position is on these things.
Hmm.
All we know is that their coal production, and I've even got friends over there that work in it. The coal production and the mining has to continue. and so they're not going to stop that yet. But the leftist, uh, democratic in America, of course, technique of the Green New Deals, etc. All of that whole, it's mainly democratic. You'll find it'll lean into liberal because liberals very close.
Hold on, Cliff. Excuse me, real quick. You said Green New Deal, and I just threw up all over my computer. You're gonna have to give me a minute. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so all of that is anti. All of that, basically, what I'm saying is, all of that is what this guy's talking about, Lord Birkenhead.
Now,
The right will be involved, but the leftists, the anti-coal industry, this is what they're doing. Yeah.
I will say that this statement right here, though, while if you're just reading this, you might skim right over this and go, okay, coal mining will be an extinct industry. This is a smoking gun. How did this guy foretell? Why did he specifically point out the coal mining industry? Now, if you live in the United States during the Obama administration, you remember the attack that was specifically on the coal mining industry. Now, in Alabama, we have a massive coal mining industry here. So this is not unfamiliar to me at all. There was local protests going on here because that is a huge portion of our economy here. We would have had thousands of people without work. But he specifically pointed out coal mining. And that's interesting to me because you have to remember that in this time, climate change was not really even on the public discourse. This was not something that they were talking about and going, oh yeah, well, the climate's changing. This wasn't anything. So what was in his mind? What led him to make this statement? That's what I'm interested in, right? Where was his mind at when he made this statement?
Well, they're still really mentioning that the globe is warming, though. They're still pushing that narrative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's to do with their idea that the sea is rising.
Mm-hmm.
Because their idea is that the ice is melting and the sea's going to rise. For the ice to melt, it has to go up a few degrees. Otherwise, and another thing they did here, propaganda-wise, because in fact this month, September, they warned us in our media saying, "Oh, we're going to be ramping up the climate change stuff because it's climate change month."
Oh yeah, Greta Thunberg.
Right? Yeah.
Thunberg.
Yeah. So that'll be global, right? The whole world got a dose of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a hot topic.
Mm-hmm.
But now's the time. See, now with the people looking at this, because it is amped up, now's the time to come out and expose it.
Yes.
Because while the people have got their attention on it, let's have a good look at it. I mean, there was a video I posted. Check it out if you haven't. Red Ice Radio. A lot of you guys have heard of him. Palmgren.
Mm-hmm.
He has put out a really good breakdown of who's behind the Thunberg movement and all that stuff. So check it out. Very well detailed as well. So what else is he saying? Just wanted to carry on because we're pushing for time.
Yeah.
So a 48, what you mentioned before, a 48-hour day will come into being by retarding the rotations of the Earth. Wow.
Yeah. So that, of course, is very dangerous, and we get into some massive repercussions if that ever happens. But so of course that has not happened yet. I don't know that it ever will. So again, we have to remember. Even Alan Watt pointed out that this guy's not staring into a crystal ball. He's not literally looking at the future like as if he knows exactly what's going to happen here. And it's okay if they get some things wrong, right? So it's he's not literally a prophet of the future. But I did find out that China built this massive dam that actually built so much weight on the Earth that it did slow the rotation of the Earth, but by such a minuscule amount that over thousands of years it might add an extra second to the day. But nevertheless, that's really all I've found on that. I don't know that there's really much much else to go into there.
Yeah, I mean that's what they're shooting for. Whether or not they can achieve it, I mean theoretically it's possible. Theoretically,
so?
Hell yes, they could do it. But I mean, can they do it in 10 years? I don't know. Would we see it in 20 years if this is their goal? Yes. And keep in mind, these points that he's pointing out here are the big points. So in other words, they're a must be for the global agenda. Like
Oh man.
All of these points he's making. He might have little things shooting off from these points, but these main points are a must be. So why would they want a 48? Like, why don't they leave it at 24? Because it'll be to do with the changes of man. It'll be
Hmm.
to why they even need to change it. So you think about it, a whole ancestral cycle for thousands of years is going to be changed because of this, the cycles of the moon and the sun. The human himself will have to be changed to cope.
Transhumanism.
Yeah, yeah. See, so yeah, they will be shooting for this. Yeah,
Hmm.
yep.
I
Uh,
think,
yeah.
man, that. But to me, that just seems like. I mean, you get to talking about, the moon and the tides and the gravitational pull from the moon and just the trajectory of Earth on its on its axis throughout the around the sun. If you go messing with that, holy shit,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah, I know. Yeah, well,
catastrophic events.
they're already messing with the jet streams. They're already messing with the weather.
Yeah,
Technically, it's already irreversible what they've done. They've been doing it for so long; it's already irreversible. Plus, a harp comes into it too. The
hmm,
uh, high frequency uh, auroral research program. It's a very um, high powered instrument
yeah,
that was invented back in the Ronald Reagan days with his laser guns and
hmm,
all that. So
yeah,
that's what that came out of. So, but these are other big topics, huge
yeah,
topics.
yeah.
So, but then he finishes with sitting in our homes, we'll see and hear events the world over. Well, there we go, the internet. Done.
Yeah. We're doing that right now, aren't we?
Yeah,
Yep.
yep. And that
I
was
think that's
90 years ago.
and that's actually uh, to appeal to our Christians out there that are listening. For first and foremost, I know you guys hear me say a lot of times I'm not religious, and I know you probably hear me talking about things outside of Christianity or religion at all. A lot of times, I want you guys to know first and foremost that I love you guys. Okay, I really do. I'm not bashing on you guys whatsoever, but to even appeal to you guys, there is end time prophecy that talks about. Uh, that the beast will shoot down what a lot of people believe is going to be Enoch. I believe it was Enoch that's going to come back. They're going to have the power of God, and for I don't remember how long it was, but is it 3 days or something that they're going to, or I don't remember how long it was. It's been a while since I've looked at this. However, these guys, the beast, Satan is going to kill them, and the whole world will be in rejoice when this happens, that they will all simultaneously view this event. They'll be able to simultaneously see this event, and that they will all rejoice because of the havoc that they have reaped on earth. I mean, they're going to punish the sinners, if you will, or the people that are against them. And we have to remember also that in Christianity they say the times will be that of Noah, where everyone will be turned against religion. So for you Christians out there, this is also, of course, appealing to you to be very interesting as far as end time prophecy goes, that he also foretold this in 1929. But beyond that, we also have to look at just the technology and really acknowledge the fact that this is quite astonishing that Cliff and I can sit here and live stream on YouTube and communicate amongst each other and share information anywhere in the world that we want to right now. If you're in the Middle East, if you're in Asia, Europe, doesn't matter where you are, you can almost instantly be receiving this information. That alone in 1929 would have been quite the thing to even conceive, to even consider in that
Yep.
time frame.
Almost unthinkable. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I mean. In the Agenda 21, you imagine what they've got planned. I mean, what have they got after 2050? They've got a big cutoff date at 2050.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's halfway through. But I mean, what's to the rest of it? Will you and I live a long life? I mean, technically, even with knowledge about the self, which we have now and can share, we can live healthier lives. We can make better informed decisions.
Well, this is what I think.
So
When we go back to Cliff, to bring it all back into the big picture, if we look at what we read and studied about the Club of Rome and We know that the Club of Rome wants to bring down population. This technology and all the advancements that are going to extend life are going to be for the elite. They are going to be for the people that have studied eugenics and they're focused on eugenics, while the rest of us that are just living our lives and trying to be peaceful human beings, we are the ones that need to be sort of shimmed off the bottom there. We're the ones that need to be gotten rid of, if you will. So that's possibly ultimately the plan, is to extend the life of the elite while decreasing the lifespan of the common slave, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. I think a big part of that is because they don't want resistance. The older generations have seen a lot of changes in their life.
Hmm.
So even I'm not that old, but even myself, I've seen a lot of changes. So people like us are targeted because we tell the young, we say it never used to be like this. You
We're
didn't have
target
to do
number one,
this.
man. They're coming after us.
Yeah, like we used to use a
Yeah,
pen and paper. We used to mail by
yeah.
mailbox only, and things like that, things that people
Hmm.
take for granted. I mean, I grew up with no TV. We had no
Yeah,
TV at all.
yeah.
And then I remember the black and white TV, then the color, and we had the first computers and that.
Hmm.
So I mean, whew,
I'll tell
it's
you a
amazing.
story. When I was a kid, we had TVs when I was a kid, but I didn't have a TV in my room. Like almost every kid. My kids have TVs. They got Roku's and all this stuff, and of course we monitored this stuff very carefully. But nevertheless, I had a radio. And that was it. But I remember when I was a young kid, I didn't have a radio or anything like that in my bedroom, and my grandmother had bought this television, and I remember hearing about the internet and wondering how this thing worked, right? So I plugged this computer in, and I'm thinking, well, how does this work? All I did was plug it into the jacks, and as far as I knew, that was what gave it internet. So I'm like, how does this send information to my computer just through the power line? How does that work? Like, that just to bring you back. But this was back in the floppy disk times, when all the computers were floppy disks, and computers were pretty much worthless then. I mean, really, what the hell would you do with it? It's quite the transition to see where we've come now, where I've got webcams and big TVs and mixers and computers and all this stuff that all works together in order to put my face on your screen almost simultaneously with the microphone, giving you information, and Cliff coming in through Discord to speak directly through my computer and then back to your screen and your speakers thousands of miles away. It's incredible what's being done, especially when you just look at the timing. It's not as if you're receiving this information 5 minutes from now. It is almost simultaneous. There's maybe from the time that it takes Cliff to speak and for you to hear it, it's probably, if it wasn't for YouTube being retarded, you'd probably hear it less than a second. It'd be less than a second is for it to take, to actually reach your device. It's incredible, the technology advancements we've seen.
Yep, for sure. So yeah, I would recommend people look at that talk
Yes.
by Alan Watt called "Nothing New Under the Sun,"
Hmm.
and maybe that'll open up some ideas if people want to discuss any particular issue on all this, the global picture. Um, put it in the comments or come into Discord and get
Hmm.
involved. And we'll go over some more stuff, and there's always lots to talk about. So,
Yep. And so for you guys out there that are on YouTube, if you're not in the Discord server, please get on the Discord server. You guys